time, as we said, Continental Airlines announced today that it will lay off 12,000 employees, and its chairman said that the industry itself is losing $300 million a day. Bruce Francis has more on that.
Continental Airlines says it is furloughing 12,000 employees, more than a fifth of its workforce, as it cuts 20% of its schedule.
Continental's just getting early. We're not going to be bankrupt first, I'll tell you that, but we're going to be first to move to prevent it, and I think that's a prudent thing to do.
Northwest is also cutting its schedule by 20%, although it hasn't announced any job reductions. Most airlines are flying reduced schedules right now, but at a heavy loss. The airline industry has been losing as much as $275 million a day since Tuesday's terrorist attacks. And even with most airports now open, the outlook is bleak, with passengers reluctant to fly. Airlines face further constraints as pilots are called up for military reserve. At the same time, the carriers are paying for increased security measures. That's why Bethune and others are calling for a government bailout.
I now, and we all of us, call on the President of the United States and members of our Congress to take immediate action to restore the stability of this vital industry.
A first attempt in Congress to provide $15 billion in assistance has failed. If the money is eventually approved, it may come too late for some airlines. Midway has already folded, and 7 of the top 10 U.S. airlines lost money in the second quarter. Prior to the attacks, the industry was on a course to lose $2 billion this year. Analysts now say that could soar to $10 billion.
The financial situation is such that I really expect 3 to 4 small carriers to file for bankruptcy in the coming weeks, and for the major airlines actually to lay off people. So it's a downward spiral.
Airline chiefs will get their chance to voice their concerns directly to the Bush administration. Next week, they're going to sit down with Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta, potentially on the agenda, beefing up security without scaring away an already nervous public. Bruce Francis, CNN Financial News, New York.
At about 8:47 on Tuesday morning, this network reported something, but no one remembers what it was. It was the last news story before the planes hit. Since then, we and virtually every other news organization have reported on only one story, a multifaceted story, a huge story, an important story, but just one. So what else has happened in the world? Here's CNN's Beth Nissen.
Any other week, this would have been national news. Tropical storm Gabrielle hit Florida's Gulf Coast Friday. Heavy rains up to 4 inches in 10 hours flooded several cities, including Orlando, Tampa, and downtown Sarasota. This photo was taken in St. Petersburg. More than 300,000 homes and businesses are without power. In an opposite corner of the country, the Seattle area is mourning the loss of 16 area residents in a plane crash in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula on Wednesday. The victims had been on a cruise ship full of more than 1,000 University of Washington football fans. Their sightseeing flight was a side trip. Mexican aviation authorities suspect one of the turboprop's engines failed. In Utah on Thursday, an Amtrak passenger train collided with a Union Pacific cargo train and derailed near the Utah-Nevada border. The Amtrak train was full. Many of its passengers were traveling by rail from Denver to Oakland because airports were closed after the World Trade Center attack. 11 people were taken to Salt Lake City area hospitals for observation, but incredibly, no one was seriously injured. And in Louisville, Kentucky this week, surgeons who in July had accomplished the world's first successful implant of an artificial heart implanted an artificial heart in a second man, a 70-year-old former tire dealer whose name has not been released. He is in intensive care and is said to be recovering well. There were other stories that went almost unnoticed this week in the crush of news from the World Trade Center and Washington. This story had dominated local New York City newscasts and headlines all summer. A high-powered young public relations executive backed her SUV into a crowd outside a nightclub in the celebrity haven of the Hamptons on July 7th. 16 people were injured, several seriously. This week, a Long Island grand jury indicted the woman, Lizzie Grubman, on 26 counts, including charges of assault, drinking and driving, and fleeing a crash scene. There were also developments in the story that dominated the national airwaves this summer. California legislators this week approved the redrawing of Representative Gary Condit's district, removing part of the congressman's traditional base of support and making it less likely that he will win re-election after reports of his personal connection with Chandra Levy, the missing Washington intern. It seems hard to believe now how much attention was fixed for so long on this one missing person. Light poles, bus stops, and store windows in New York City are now papered over with photos and posters of the missing, who officially number almost 5,000. For families and friends who are desperate for word on the fates of this legion of the missing, no other news matters. Beth Nissen, CNN, New York.
As most of you know, a very provocative way to end that, wasn't it? As most of you know, virtually all of the sports activities have been canceled, at least through the weekend. Major League Baseball canceled its games Tuesday, will not start up again until Monday in some cities, Tuesdays in others. The National Football League canceled its games too, and those of you old enough to remember will recall that in 1963, the NFL on the weekend, the Sunday after President Kennedy was assassinated, did go ahead and play its games. The then Commissioner Pete Rozelle said many, many years later, excuse me, that was the worst decision he ever made. In any case, there was no question that athletes and the people that own these teams thought better of gathering a lot of fans in stadiums across the country. It will start up again soon, but not this weekend. More on sport and the tragedy from CNN and Sports Illustrated correspondent Mark Viviano.
Saturday was a crisp, fall-like day around the United States, a day when college football would normally dominate the sports world, but once again, Tuesday's tragic events cast a long shadow. 116 Division I-A college football teams had their games postponed, but not all stadiums were deserted. At Ohio State University, 15,000 fans, about 85,000 less than would have watched the Buckeye football team play San Diego State, paid tribute to the dead and missing. While at Clemson University, about 7,000 fans silently watched flag-carrying ROTC cadets instead of the Tiger football players making the traditional run down the hill at Clemson Stadium. 15 NFL games will be missed on Sunday and Monday night, but players like these New Orleans Saints continue to aid in the rescue and relief effort in any way they can. The defending Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens worked out Saturday, but their minds were far from the gridiron.
I don't know how hard or how easy it's going to be to get to work next week, but you got to try and focus as much as possible on the task at hand and try to not forget, but try to put this aside for a little bit and focus on what you're doing.
One event that did go on as scheduled was the German 500 auto race in Berlin, renamed the American Memorial. But the race was also overshadowed by tragedy as driver Alex Zanardi was critically injured in this horrific crash just 12 laps from the finish. Both Zanardi's legs had to be amputated as a result of the accident. He is in critical but stable condition. Major League Baseball is gearing up to resume its regular season on Monday, with news of stringent new security measures including no backpacks or large bags and no coolers allowed to be brought into stadiums. On Saturday, the New York Yankees had their first official workout since Tuesday. The defending world champions struggled to just put the bat on the ball and play a simple game of catch.
We may be able to offer some kind of distraction to the sadness that's going on.
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for everybody involved. When you go through something like this, baseball seems so trivial that it's really hard to think about getting excited about getting a base hit or scoring a run or doing something like that in the wake of what's gone on. So it's going to be difficult for everybody.
Meanwhile, across town at Shea Stadium, the Mets also returned to the field, but not before helping New York firefighters collect donated supplies. The team is scheduled to fly to Pittsburgh Sunday for a Monday game against the Pirates. I'm Mark Viviano.
I'll show you one more thing that went on at Yankee Stadium today. I mean, modern athletes, and often deservedly so, they get wrapped for their self-centeredness and the like. So the Yankees were out there working, and then all of a sudden they dropped to their knees as a group in prayer. Their country, the people who lost their lives, all of it. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much you're paid. It hurts just the same, or what you do for a living. And the flags at Yankee Stadium and around the country at half-staff. Fans will come back to the ballpark next week, here and around the country. It won't be the same. Very little will be. Out there in the streets of New York today, there are 5,000 families who wonder if they will ever see a loved one again. Each one of them, we suspect, has their own unique story. They certainly have their own affection for their husband, wife, daughter, son, whatever. All of the stories matter. Here is one of them from correspondent Candy Crowley.
Yes, Dan? Yes, this is David Vincent.
He's an Eastman Kodak executive from Webster, New York. A man with a problem to solve, a man on a mission.
How is it being set up so that I can make the best use of my time? Because you're working a timeline here. You have to get to your daughter as fast as you can.
Melissa is missing. She's a technology recruiter at Alliance Consulting.
But we know that that's 102nd floor of Tower 1.
The enormity of what's happened in David Vincent's life shows on his face, but does not slow his step.
Please take a picture. Please focus on the picture. To get her face out there so that...
Working on 3 hours sleep and a couple of crackers, he protects his fondest hopes, battles his worst fears, and sometimes loses.
I don't have any video of her. To be honest with you, Melissa didn't like to be videoed. She used to holler at me every time I did. I'd give anything to have her holler at me right now.
I'd give anything, he says, to have her holler at me right now. It's a rare lapse. Mostly, there is a desperate monotony to his mission.
I know she made a 911 call at 9:02:07.
It's all that David Vincent knows about what happened to his eldest daughter. It's enough to hang hope on.
When we went back to the cell phone provider, the only thing that we had that they could tell us is that there was a 911 call made from that cell phone at 9:02, which was some 17 minutes after the jet had piled into the thing.
9:02:07. He tells it to everyone he talks to. He clings to it for dear life, because of course it is.
I need to know where she was when she made that call, because that will tell me whether she was downstairs just getting off the path and maybe in a void someplace downstairs, or whether I have to understand that she was upstairs on 102 and have to wonder whether she was able to get out or not able to get out.
By evening, David Vincent has pretty much worn out the corner of 26th and Lexington, and his cell battery is fading, so he moves on. Craig Spitzer is CEO of Alliance. 7 employees, everyone thought to be in the building that morning, are missing. He cannot, will not, bring himself to believe they're gone.
I'm not going to say that to you right now.
You can't?
No, and I won't. And I won't for myself, and I won't for the people in there.
In there is a room full of people who have loved someone too long to give up so soon, and what's left after hope is unthinkable. It is why they agreed to expose this rawest of human times to the glare of the camera lens, because maybe somebody out there has information about Roland, something that will keep his brother moving.
I go to sleep with hope, I wake up with none.
And perhaps somebody saw Eric in a stairwell racing to safety.
We don't know. Maybe he's out there someplace, got hit on the head, and he doesn't know who he is. You know, maybe he's unconscious and he didn't have any identification on him.
And as it turns out, nobody can say for sure that Melissa was in the office for that 8:30 meeting.
I have to tell you, Craig, that's the best news that I could possibly hear, because what you're telling me is you can't confirm Melissa in that office space, and that's what I had to know. Yeah. That's what keeps me going.
So if you know anything about Melissa, call her father. He'd give anything to hear her holler at him again. Candy Crowley, CNN, New York.
We have seen, all of us together, you and I, so much sorrow and sadness this week. Up next, CNN Hotline. Jack Cafferty hosts a cast of several, a chance for you to call in, speak out, talk about the things that are on your mind in this awful and difficult week. At first light tomorrow, I'm going to take a tour of Ground Zero, and we'll report on that here tomorrow night at 10. We hope you'll join us. Until then, good night.